welcome back to Fenralian Gamer. Today we're diving into the newest and most mysterious game in the Resident Evil universe. All the information I'll share in this video is based on early impressions from those who've had a chance to try the game, gameplay previews from gaming media, and officially released details. So before the game even launches, I'm bringing together all the available previews for you. But first, if you want more content like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. As you know, Resident Evil Requiem was one of the most explosive announcements at Summer Game Fest 2025. After a long silence, the Resident Evil developers finally broke the silence and officially revealed the game. With the first reveal, everyone had the same questions. Who is the new main character? Where exactly does the story take place? And most importantly, what does the gameplay look like? Thanks to those who had a chance to play the demo after the event, we're starting to get some answers. First, let's talk about the new protagonist, Grace Ashcroft, who appears as a technical analyst working for the FBI. According to early impressions, Grace wakes up hanging upside down in a luxurious medical facility, though we don't yet know exactly what kind of place it is. The environment reflects classic Resident Evil vibes: antique furniture, faded walls with traces of the past, and dark, creepy hallways that send shivers down your spine. As you start exploring the environment in the first few minutes, the game's classic puzzle elements kick in. Locked doors, missing fuses, pathways that need to be unlocked. According to the player's feedback, progressing through dark areas in first-person view creates an intense feeling of claustrophobia. Capcom has already stated that the game is designed to be experienced primarily from a first-person perspective for maximum immersion. But here's a great detail for players: you can also switch to third-person view at any time without needing a separate game mode. You can simply toggle it from the menu during gameplay. Based on early feedback, the third-person perspective feels smooth and satisfying, on par with RE2, RE3, and RE4 remake quality. According to those who previewed the game, the environmental design is one of Requiem's strongest aspects, especially the building where the game starts. Feels like much more than a typical hospital. Players describe the surroundings as filled with Victorian-era furniture, old-fashioned wallpaper, and antique decorations. It immediately brings to mind the iconic mansion from the roots of the Resident Evil series. Some believe the building is an old, wealthy estate secretly converted into a research facility. What's clear is that the environment feels oppressively eerie, with narrow spaces and dim lighting constantly keeping the player on edge. Almost everyone who previewed the game pointed out the oppressive darkness and clever use of lighting. At the beginning of the story, Grace is completely surrounded by darkness, with many areas cloaked in shadows, forcing you to explore to move forward. According to those who tried the game, you initially only find a lighter, and with its small flame, you slowly navigate your way through the darkness. This design keeps that classic Resident Evil "something's coming" tension constantly alive. The limited visibility from the lighter both adds to your sense of helplessness and fuels your desire to explore. This use of lighting creates a serious sense of claustrophobia, especially in first-person mode. One specific detail that really caught the attention of players is a children's book found in the game. The book describes a mysterious woman with giant eyes who watches you in the dark. And shortly after, this character actually appears in the game in an incredibly eerie sequence. According to early impressions, this creature is massive, grotesque, and constantly scans the environment with her enormous eyes. Her entrance into the scene is described as highly impactful. This sequence focuses entirely on hiding and escaping, perfectly recreating the tension-filled moments of classic Resident Evil titles. Plus, the creature's design doesn't resemble any enemy we've seen in the series before. It's fair to say that this new creature is the latest addition to Resident Evil's iconic stalker enemy lineup. Most players compared her to unforgettable figures like Mr. X, Jack Baker, and Lady Dimitrescu. However, based on impressions, this time the design is far more grotesque and unsettling. Those giant eyes allow the creature to constantly track your presence in the environment. You can hear her ominous sounds from behind walls, and her sudden appearances in confined spaces keep the tension sky high. According to those who tried the game, it's not easy to avoid her. Narrow hallways and limited escape routes force you to stay on high alert at all times. This portion of the game has been widely compared to the iconic House of Beneviento segment from Resident Evil Village. As you might recall, that section left players defenseless, relying entirely on psychological horror and stealth. Requiem's early stages seem to follow a similar formula. So far, based on the feedback from early players, no significant action or gunplay has been shown. Instead, the initial focus is on making the player feel helpless, encouraging exploration, puzzle solving, and survival through hiding. The classic Resident Evil formula is dominant at this stage. However, Capcom previously stated that very different gameplay dynamics will be introduced as the game progresses. Capcom previously announced that Resident Evil Requiem would not only feature classic horror elements but also bring a new tone and different gameplay dynamics to the series. However, based on player feedback so far, at least in the demo, this promised major change hasn't been strongly felt. On the contrary, the familiar Resident Evil atmosphere dominates. The opening sections of the game reflect the classic formula of stealth, hiding, and exploration. Since the promised dramatic changes and fast-paced action aren't visible yet, players are still filled with curiosity. Perhaps later in the game we'll finally see the new structure Capcom hinted at. As for Grace Ashcroft, we still don't know much about who she really is or what abilities she has. All we know is that she works as a technical analyst for the FBI. According to early impressions, Grace doesn't behave like a trained agent. Instead, she moves through the world with fear and vulnerability like an ordinary person. This is especially noticeable in the opening stages. Players noted that Grace's interactions with the environment make her seem inexperienced and unprepared. Whether Grace will gain combat skills, how the fighting mechanics will evolve, or whether other characters will become playable remains unknown. There are plenty of theories, but no official details have been revealed. In fact, some theories suggest that we'll play as other characters later in the game. These claims are based on director Koshi Nakanishi's previous work. You might remember that in Resident Evil Revelations, players switched between different characters to progress through the story, so it's only natural to wonder if Requiem will have a similar structure. Adding fuel to these theories, players have pointed out a voice in the trailers that sounds remarkably like Leon S. Kennedy. Although Capcom has made no official announcement, many fans strongly believe Leon will be part of the game. As for the setting, there's still no confirmed information, but both trailer footage and player impressions suggest the environment could be a post-bombing version of Raccoon City. As you know, Raccoon City is the iconic city in the Resident Evil universe that was destroyed by a nuclear blast and quarantined. If these theories are true, Requiem could take us back to the ruins of this devastated city years later. Players who previewed the game also noted a mix of classic architectural remnants and modern but abandoned spaces, supporting this idea. But without an official confirmation from Capcom, the location remains a mystery. Beyond these details, a major question still lingers. How much of Requiem will focus on action, and how much on horror? Capcom previously stated that the game would lean heavily into cinematic storytelling. At Summer Game Fest, Jeff Keighley teased, "This game is not just classic horror, expect high-paced action too," raising expectations even further. However, based on early impressions, the demo focuses entirely on suspense, stealth, and the feeling of helplessness. It remains unclear how gunfights, large-scale action scenes, or fast-paced sequences will play out. Most likely, these elements will appear later in the game. If we look at the series' history, we know Capcom always has surprises up its sleeve. They took a major risk with Resident Evil 7 by fully shifting to a first-person perspective, which ended up reviving the franchise's survival horror roots to critical acclaim. Then came Resident Evil Village, blending horror with action into an almost horror amusement park experience. Naturally, everyone is curious about how Requiem will balance these two aspects. Based on early feedback, fear and tension dominate the beginning, but many expect Capcom to ramp up the action as the game progresses. In terms of visuals, Requiem is said to have the best graphics of the series so far. According to players who tried the demo, Capcom's RE engine has reached its peak in this title. Lighting, shadows, environment details, and character animations are reportedly stunning. Grace Ashcroft's facial animations, the object detail levels, and the depth of the dark atmosphere make players feel like they've stepped into a true nightmare. Additionally, interactive environmental elements have been expanded. Players can manipulate lights, switches, and objects, enhancing exploration and puzzle-solving mechanics. Still, no matter how impressive the visuals and atmosphere are, the balance of gameplay remains a mystery. According to player impressions, the opening survival-by-hiding formula works well as a classic horror approach. But the Resident Evil brand has, in recent years, leaned heavily on action and character development too. That's why players are eagerly wondering whether Grace will gain more abilities, how weapon variety will unfold, and how the classic Resident Evil combat mechanics will be integrated. Capcom is keeping tight-lipped, revealing no concrete details for now. The only confirmed fact is the release date. Resident Evil Requiem officially launches on February 26, 2026 for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series XS, and PC. The timing is consistent with Capcom's previous major Resident Evil releases. In the coming months, more trailers, gameplay showcases, and new information are expected at events like Gamescom. Players are especially excited to learn how the action will unfold, whether there will be other playable characters, and whether the game's biggest mysteries will be resolved. Alright folks, that's all the current details we have about Resident Evil Requiem. Of course, everything so far is based on impressions from those who've tried the game early. The real experience begins for all of us in 2026. When the game launches, we'll play together, explore every detail, and discuss everything right here. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for the latest news in the gaming world, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.